Imagine leaving town for a few months and coming back to discover that your life has been completely turned upside down. Picture this. You walk up to a piece of land you've known your whole life, a place that holds memories of your childhood and the legacy of your family, only to find something so unbelievable that for a moment you think you're dreaming. That's exactly what happened to me. I thought I was stepping back into my quiet neighborhood, back to the property my grandfather left me. But instead, I was standing in front of a towering luxury hotel. Gleaming glass windows reflected the sunlight. Valet drivers in crisp uniforms were practicing their greetings, and a huge banner stretched across the entrance that read, "Grand Opening Soon." I froze in shock. My mind went blank. This couldn't be real. At first, I thought I had taken a wrong turn. Maybe after months away, I had mixed up the streets. So I double-checked the address, looked at the familiar trees that lined the road, and even noticed the old lamppost I had walked past countless times. No mistake, this was my land, the very same land I inherited after my grandfather passed away. I remembered when it was just a simple lot, a stretch of green with a few trees where I used to sit in the summer, imagining what I'd do with it someday. My grandfather always told me to hold on to it because land was more valuable than gold. I never imagined that I'd return one day to find it completely taken over. The shock quickly gave way to confusion. How could an entire hotel appear out of nowhere? Construction like this takes months, even years. And somehow, while I was overseas for work, nobody had bothered to contact me. I hadn't signed a single paper, hadn't been asked a single question. I walked closer, trying to take it all in. Guests were already checking the place out, investors in suits were walking the property, and workers were adding finishing touches. It looked like everything was ready to launch. But the strangest part, not a single person seemed to think anything was wrong. I stopped one of the nearby neighbors, a woman who had lived down the street for years. She gave me a polite smile and said, "Oh, isn't it amazing? The HOA really outdid themselves this time. That empty land was finally put to use." Her words hit me like a punch in the stomach. The HOA? My heart started racing. Did she really mean the Homeowners Association? Because if she did, that meant they had taken it upon themselves to do this without me. The more I asked around, the more unbelievable it became. Neighbors told me that the HOA had arranged for developers to build a hotel, claiming the land was unused. Some even said the HOA insisted I had abandoned the property, and that the neighborhood needed something profitable for everyone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was one thing to put up flowers or repaint fences, but to build an entire hotel on my land without asking me? My shock started turning into anger. This land wasn't just dirt and grass. It was the last piece of my grandfather's legacy, something he entrusted to me. I could still remember him telling me stories about how hard he worked to buy it, how proud he was to pass it down. And now some smug HOA committee thought they could just sweep me out of the picture and hand it over, like it was theirs to give. My blood boiled with every new detail I uncovered. As I stood there, staring at the towering building, I couldn't help but feel like I had stepped into some twisted alternate reality. Everyone around me was treating this as normal, as if my land had magically stopped belonging to me the moment I left town. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just a mistake, it was theft, plain and simple. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The hotel stood there like a giant monument to their arrogance, but I wasn't going to be intimidated. They thought they had erased me from the picture, but what they didn't know was that I had every intention of fighting back. What I didn't realize just yet was that the law was about to turn everything in my favor. And this so-called victory of theirs was going to become my biggest win. When the HOA president finally saw me standing there, his reaction told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't surprised. In fact, he looked annoyed, as if I had come back at the wrong time and ruined his perfect little plan. He walked over in his expensive tailored suit, wearing that smug smile he always had, the kind that makes you want to wipe it off someone's face. With his hands clasped behind his back, he said almost casually, "Oh, you must be confused. This land was sitting here unused for years, so we decided to put it to better use. Now the entire community will benefit from it." I stood there stunned, trying to process his words. Better use? Benefit the community? He was acting like I had simply abandoned the property and handed it over to them. I took a deep breath and said firmly, "This is my land. You can't just build a hotel on it without my permission." His smirk widened. He tilted his head slightly, the arrogance practically dripping from his voice as he replied, "Actually, we can. You weren't here. You weren't contributing. And the HOA made the decision to lease it out. You should be thanking us. We've turned a patch of useless dirt into something valuable." That was the moment I realized just how far they had gone. They weren't even pretending it was a mistake. They genuinely thought they had the right to do whatever they wanted. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, anger bubbling over, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing my temper wouldn't get me anywhere. Instead, I decided to ask questions. I wanted to hear exactly how they justified stealing what was mine. Who gave you permission? Where's the paperwork? Did I sign something while I was away? Did anyone even try to contact me? I demanded. The president straightened his tie and chuckled lightly, as though I was just a naive child. You weren't here. You didn't respond to notices. The community voted, and the majority agreed this was best. Notices? That was a blatant lie. I had given my forwarding address before leaving. If they truly wanted to contact me, they could have. And since when did a vote mean they could take private property and give it to someone else? It was clear now. They had done this deliberately, hoping I'd never come back to challenge them. By this time, a small crowd had started gathering around us. Some neighbors watched nervously, clearly aware of how shady this whole thing was. Others whispered among themselves, some even nodding in agreement with the president, as if his words made sense. But to me, every second of this confrontation only fueled my determination. I wasn't about to let them rewrite reality. I turned and looked at the massive hotel again. Workers were setting up tables inside, staff were being trained, and investors in suits were walking around with clipboards. Everything about it screamed ready to launch. It was obvious they were just days away from opening. They had invested millions into this project, all while thinking I was out of the picture. My blood was boiling, but then something hit me, a thought so sharp it cut through my anger. If they really had gone this far, if they really had built this hotel without me, then who was legally in control of it? I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew one thing. The land was still mine. Nobody had ever bought it from me, and I never signed it away. That meant something. That had to mean something. Without another word, I pulled out my phone and left. The HOA president called after me, probably thinking I was running away defeated, but I wasn't. I was heading straight to the county clerk's office to get the official records. And when I walked into that office, my hands were shaking. Part of me was terrified I'd find out they had somehow tricked me, that they had managed to steal it on paper, too. But when the clerk pulled up the file and handed me the printed copy, I nearly laughed out loud. There it was, in bold black letters, my name. The land was still legally mine. Nobody else's. No HOA, no investors, no developers, just me. Which meant every brick, every window, every single floor of that shiny new hotel sitting on top of my land belonged to me, too. I left the office clutching those papers like they were made of gold. The weight of the truth sank in with every step I took. The HOA had played a dangerous game, and they thought they'd won. But instead, they had built a multi-million-dollar hotel on property they didn't own. And because of that one undeniable fact, the law was on my side. When I returned to face the HOA president again, the smugness was gone. The second I laid the paperwork on the table in front of him, the color drained from his face. His confident posture collapsed. He stammered, This can't be right. We had agreements. We had investors. You can't just claim it." But I didn't need to argue anymore. The documents spoke louder than anything I could say. My land, my rights, my hotel. The more I studied the paperwork, the clearer everything became. The law was simple. Whatever was built on land legally belonged to the landowner, unless a contract or lease specifically stated otherwise. And since my name was the only one tied to the property, the hotel, as absurd as it sounded, was mine. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. For weeks, the HOA and their investors had been patting themselves on the back, celebrating their brilliant project, while all along they were actually building a fortune in my name. At first, I could hardly believe it. It sounded too good to be true, almost like one of those wild stories you hear online and assume is fake. But this wasn't a rumor. This was reality. I didn't just own a piece of dirt anymore. I owned a multi-million-dollar hotel standing proudly on the busiest street in the neighborhood. The glass tower that had once made me furious now looked like the greatest stroke of luck in my life. But luck or not, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. The HOA wasn't going to roll over and hand me the keys with a smile. Sure enough, the moment I confronted them with the truth, they tried to twist and turn their way out of it. The president's confident smirk had vanished, replaced with panic. "You don't understand," he stammered, waving his hands as if that would change the facts. "The investors have put millions into this project. Contracts have been signed. People are counting on this hotel. You can't just claim it for yourself." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "I don't have to claim anything. It's already mine." That sentence hit them harder than any punch could have. A silence spread through the room, and for once I saw fear in the HOA president's eyes. He knew the game was over, and he didn't like it. The next step was making sure everything was airtight. I immediately hired a lawyer, one of the best in property law. Sitting in his office, I laid out the documents, explained what had happened, and waited for his reaction. He studied the papers carefully, flipping through the county records, the HOA's so-called agreements, and the hotel's development plans. Finally, he looked up at me with a smile. "They've dug themselves into a hole," he said. "Legally, the land is yours. Legally, the hotel is yours too. They never had the right to authorize construction, and the developers failed to verify ownership. This entire project is now under your control." Hearing those words gave me a rush of relief and power all at once. For weeks, maybe months, these people had thought they outsmarted me, thought I was gone for good. But now, the law had flipped everything in my favor. Of course, the HOA didn't accept defeat quietly. They scrambled to fight back, throwing everything they could at me. They sent me angry letters, filed baseless complaints, and even tried to turn my neighbors against me by spreading rumors. "He's greedy," they told people. "He doesn't care about the community. He just wants to cash in." But none of it worked. The truth was too strong, and the paperwork was too clear. The investors tried to intimidate me as well. Suited men showed up at my door, warning me that I was playing with fire. They claimed I'd never be able to run the hotel, that I should sell it back to them for a reasonable price. But every offer they made was laughably low compared to the real value. They wanted me to panic, to fold under pressure. Instead, their threats only made me more determined. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't some clueless pushover. I wasn't going to let anyone bully me out of what was mine. Every time they tried to scare me, I reminded myself of my grandfather's words. Land is power. Protect it no matter what. He hadn't worked his entire life just so some arrogant HOA board could steal it from his grandson, so I stood my ground. My lawyer filed official notices, securing my ownership of both the land and the hotel. The HOA's so-called contracts with the developers fell apart under legal scrutiny, exposed as worthless, because they had no authority to make those deals in the first place. The developers, embarrassed and furious, turned their anger toward the HOA instead of me. And with every legal victory, my position grew stronger. The moment it all became official was unforgettable. I sat in my lawyer's office as he handed me the final confirmation documents. "Congratulations," he said with a grin. "You're the legal owner of the hotel." I stared at the papers in disbelief, my hands trembling slightly as I held them. Me, the guy who had left town with nothing more than a patch of grass, was now the owner of a luxury hotel. Walking through the lobby that first time as the rightful owner felt surreal. The polished marble floors, the elegant chandeliers, the staff moving briskly about. It was all mine, every inch of it. I could see the shock in people's eyes when they realized the truth. The same HOA members who once tried to erase me from the picture now had to watch me take control of the crown jewel they thought they had stolen, and that was just the beginning. Owning a hotel overnight might sound like a dream come true, but the truth is, it came with more challenges than I could have ever imagined. The moment the legal documents confirmed that I was the rightful owner, I thought the battle was over. But I quickly realized it was just beginning. The HOA wasn't done with me. The investors weren't done with me. Even the developers weren't done with me. All of them had poured money, time, and pride into the project, and now all of it belonged to me. To them, I wasn't just the guy who inherited a piece of land. I was the obstacle standing between them and millions of dollars. The very next week, I was bombarded with offers. At first, they came politely. Calls, emails, meetings where they sat across from me with practiced smiles. "Let's be reasonable," they'd say. "Sell us the hotel for a fair price. You don't want the headache of running a business like this. Take the money, walk away, and everyone wins." They laid out numbers that sounded huge at first, amounts I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized those offers were a joke. The hotel was worth far more than what they were dangling in front of me. When I refused, the tone shifted. The polite smiles disappeared, replaced with thinly veiled threats. One investor leaned across the table during a meeting and hissed, "You're in over your head. Hotels aren't for amateurs. If you're not careful, you'll lose everything. Your land, your reputation, even your safety." Another developer sneered, "The community will turn against you. Do you really want to be the guy who ruined their chance at prosperity?" Their words were designed to scare me, to make me doubt myself. And for a moment, I'll admit, the fear crept in. I wasn't a businessman. I had no experience managing something this big. A hotel wasn't just a building. It was a living, breathing operation with staff, guests, bookings, finances, and endless moving parts. But then I remembered something my grandfather had always said. If someone tries to cheat you out of what's yours, don't just fight back, make them regret ever trying. Those words echoed in my head and gave me strength. The HOA and these investors thought I would just fold. They didn't know me at all. Instead of selling, I decided to go all in. I met with hotel management companies, interviewed professionals who had years of experience running successful businesses, and brought in a team that knew exactly how to make this place thrive. I may not have known how to run a hotel, but I was smart enough to surround myself with people who did. The first thing we did was rebrand. The hotel that the HOA had arrogantly pushed into existence now had a new name, one tied directly to my family legacy. The giant banner outside came down, and a new one went up announcing fresh ownership. Staff were retrained, the decor was refreshed, and within weeks the hotel had a new identity. When the doors officially opened under my ownership, the turnout was incredible. Guests loved the sleek design, the service, and the energy the place gave off. Bookings filled faster than anyone expected. Every day I walked through the lobby, I felt a mix of disbelief and pride. The marble floors that once made me furious now felt like a victory under my feet. The chandeliers that once represented the HOA's arrogance now sparkled, as a reminder of how far I'd come. The hotel wasn't just a business, it was a symbol. It was proof that no matter how many people tried to erase me, I could stand taller than all of them. The HOA, of course, lost their minds. They filed more complaints, tried to argue that the hotel didn't belong in the community, even attempted to rally neighbors against me. But this time, their words fell flat. People could see with their own eyes that I wasn't some greedy outsider. I was running the hotel fairly, creating jobs and even offering discounts for local residents. Slowly, the neighbors who once doubted me started coming around. Some even apologized for believing the HOA's lies. It was a sweet reversal. The very building that was supposed to erase me from my own land had become the foundation of my success. And every dollar it made was a reminder that the HOA's arrogance had backfired spectacularly. They tried to steal from me, but instead they handed me everything. The fallout from the entire ordeal was almost as dramatic as the battle itself. The HOA, once feared and respected in the neighborhood, started to crumble under the weight of their arrogance. Their president, the same man who had looked me in the eye and told me I should thank them, was humiliated. He faced so much backlash for overstepping his authority that he eventually stepped down. Without him, the HOA's grip on the neighborhood loosened, and people started questioning everything they had done for years. For me, the victory was more than just legal or financial. It was personal. Every time I walked into the hotel lobby, I thought about the first moment I saw it, when I stood in shock, thinking I had lost everything. Back then, it felt like the HOA had stolen my grandfather's legacy from me. But now, instead of being erased, My grandfather's name was tied to something far greater than either of us had ever imagined. It wasn't just land anymore. It was a thriving business, a landmark, and a reminder that no one could push us out of what we rightfully owned. What made it even sweeter was watching the very same people who had doubted me slowly change their tune. At first, some neighbors sided with the HOA, believing their lies that I was selfish or greedy. They thought I'd destroy the neighborhood's harmony. But when they saw the reality, the jobs the hotel created, the guests it attracted, and the money it brought into local businesses, they started seeing me differently. People who once whispered behind my back now came up to me with smiles, telling me how proud they were of what I'd done. Some even admitted that they had been wrong to believe the HOA's story. The irony of it all? The same HOA members who once tried to erase me from my land ended up booking events at my hotel. Birthdays, weddings, anniversaries. They had no choice but to walk through the doors of the very building that symbolized their failure. I would sometimes see them sitting in the lobby, trying to avoid my eyes, and I couldn't help but smile. They had tried to destroy me, and instead they built my biggest victory. The investors and developers eventually moved on. They knew the law wasn't on their side, and every attempt to intimidate me had failed. Some of them even tried to negotiate again, offering higher and higher amounts of money to buy the hotel from me. But by then, it wasn't about money anymore. Sure, the hotel was valuable, but it was more than that. It was proof that I couldn't be bullied or erased. Selling it off to the same people who had tried to steal it from me would have felt like betraying everything I had fought for. So I turned down every offer. Running the hotel wasn't easy at first. There were long nights, stressful meetings, and countless decisions to make. But each challenge only made me stronger. I hired a trusted management company, kept the staff motivated, and slowly learned the ins and outs of the business. And to my surprise, I started to enjoy it. I wasn't just the owner on paper. I became part of the hotel's story, part of its daily rhythm. Guests recognized me, employees respected me, and every success reminded me that I had turned a nightmare into an opportunity. Looking back, it still amazes me how close I came to losing everything. If I hadn't checked the records, if I had just accepted the HOA's lies, I might have walked away empty-handed. Instead, I discovered just how powerful knowledge of the law can be. The HOA relied on intimidation, arrogance, and deception. But in the end, the truth and persistence was stronger than all of that. So what's the lesson in all of this? It's simple. Never underestimate the value of what you own, and never let anyone convince you that you don't have a right to it. Whether it's land, a house, or even just your voice in a community, don't give it up without a fight. The HOA thought they could silence me, thought they could erase me, but instead, they ended up handing me the keys to a hotel. And every time I walk through those polished glass doors, past the chandeliers that gleam in the lobby, I smile. Not because I got lucky, but because I refused to let them take what was mine. That hotel isn't just a business. It's a monument to the biggest mistake the HOA ever made. And the best part? They built it for me.